Okay, we are now on to our acrylic painting techniques. Make sure your name is on this. Colors don't really matter too much for this assignment, too much. The biggest thing is techniques that you are meeting them. So I'm gonna zoom in with these. Make sure I stay in frame as well. And here we go. Okay. So opacity means our colors are not see-through. So we need to apply our colors to be not see-through. So meaning I should not be able to see any of the paper. Depending on your color choice, you might need to do this a couple more times. Sometimes I find it helps to do a couple of coats in different directions as well. But you find what works for you. This is all about techniques before we get on our good materials, our good paper, things like that. But we don't want to see our paper. Like, I can see a little bit of paper coming through right now in those thin areas, so later on I'll work on that. Whereas transparent, I do want my paper to come through. So I told you in our mixing worksheets not to thin down our paints. You can thin down your paints if it applies to you, but warning, sometimes it will lift up your paint on your canvas paper, things like that. You just need to be careful, keep an eye on things like it. So when you do this, what I recommend, I'm gonna bring my water into frame, is I just barely dip the tip of my brush into the water just so I can really control how much water I am bringing into my brush. And you can see how much little paint I have in my palette right there. And just very slowly adding in water into my paint so I can really control how much water I'm adding in, because we don't want to add too much too fast at all. So this one, we do want to be able to see our paper through it. Maybe I'm going to add a little bit more water now to where we can now see our paper through, and it kind of takes on a water color effect, which is cool with acrylic. I actually have had students paint with acrylic paint and it looks like watercolor, but it's not. It's super beautiful, but we love it. So once my opacity layer dries, I'll do another coat on it so you guys can see. And we have done something similar with our gradient, but now I'm gonna do two colors turning into a gradient. So I'm gonna do a blue meeting with a red. I don't care what colors you guys do, it's up to you. The biggest thing is we need to have soft edges where we can't tell where one color ends and another color begins. And the key with this is having, it's called wet paint, wet on wet. So you can see that. Hopefully I'll zoom in even more. You probably can tell that my paint is still, yep, you can see the shimmer on it, it's still wet. And I'll even add even more right now, so that, and I'm gonna bring this up a little bit higher. I usually bring it up like a third-ish of where I want it to be at. Not all the way. I'm gonna clean, and we do try to work kind of fast with this, so FYI, you're kind of in a time crunch. And then a good amount of red. Same thing, and now I'm gonna bring my red farther down. And now that my blue is on my brush, I'm gonna start pulling that up. Which isn't that bad. Got a little bit into my translucent area, not bad. Just don't want a hard brush anywhere or hard line anywhere. So if you guys see anything, make sure you shout it out at me. And it's gonna be a little bit different on camera than it is in person. The only kind of hard area I see is about right there, right now. So I'm gonna keep working that. Oops, had it on my brush. Let's keep blending. I'm gonna bring some more red back in and red back down. It's kind of a push and pull. Like a tug of war with your colors. And that I like, where I can't tell where one ends and another begins. Okay, dry brush. So, dry brush is just as it sounds, where we need to have a dry brush. So if your brush is wet from using it, maybe switch it out and grab, literally as the name sounds, a dry brush. So I'm just gonna grab one that's brand new. And I might grab actually a couple. So I'm gonna lay down a base color right now. Let's just lay down a red, it's fine. I'm gonna lay down just a red color. Lay down a base color, just so we have something, so it's not just white paper, lame, boring. And then with my now clean, dry brush, I'm gonna go in with, I'll bring my palette into frame. I'm gonna go in with a tiny, tiny, tiny amount of paint on my brush, and you might be able to see I'm wiping a lot of paint off on my palette. You can do this on your paper towel as well too. Sometimes I'll have like a piece of paper near me and I'll be wiping off paint on my brush as well too. You're probably wondering, when would you use a dry brush, Riley? Hair texture, grass texture, a lot of times this comes in handy and you don't even know it. So it's a really great texture to have. Blending, it can just add like a really cool background as well. Really just cool. So we're just going in, adding like a dry texture to it. Not a lot of paint. We need a dry brush, small little bit on my paintbrush to get that dry texture, which is really cool. So layering of colors. I'm just gonna keep going with my red and blue. Might as well. Okay, I'm gonna be using kind of a thinner paint. So we're gonna layer. So painting, beautiful for layering. I love paintings that have colors and colors and colors and colors, because they can be beautiful. And if you saw in my like primary touch series, you probably saw I had lots of layering of paint. I went through an obsessive time frame of layering of colors I loved. So I'll do blue and yellow over top of this so you can see how my primary color, my secondary colors get made as well too. So now I'm just going to go over top of this with yellow with layering of colors, kind of in a dry brush format as well too. Painting can be really messy, and some styles can be really, really, really beautiful in some styles. Some people think you have to be realistic and like clean and nice and neat for it to be considered good, quote unquote. I did air quotes. And that's not necessarily true. Like some of my favorite painters, and some of you guys might know, like Van Gogh, he was not a super clean painter. He was actually pretty messy. Layering can be really, really, really fun. I find that stuff really interesting. Mark Rothko had a whole series of layering paint. Okay, well, I just got paint everywhere on my stuff, but that's always okay. Okay. Keep moving on. Okay. And my opaque is ready for another layer, so let's add on another layer quick. Cool. And I'm gonna apply another layer down. I'm gonna do a thinner layer for my stippling just so it's not white. So if you saw in my most recent, let me move it on up. In my most recent series, I'm doing like a pop art, Roy Lichtenstein, like comic book. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I would definitely recommend you guys get into some art history of what I'm talking about. But stippling is dots. So for this one, I'm gonna get some white. Okay, for painting now, we're gonna make dots just for texture wise, because texture is really cool, but we're not gonna use the bristles of our brush. No, 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 not at all. We are going to be using the butt end, the end of our paintbrush to make the dots. So you'll see what I mean. So what I do is I paint on my paint tray and I keep setting it down on my worksheet. That's why I keep getting paint all over. Okay. I take my palette, I take my paintbrush and I dip it in. Well, dip, dip, dip. And then I go in. Just make sure I'm in frame. And I dot. And if you want, you can do like a little to make sure it's perfect. Make sure it's perfect. And I like to go in between to make like a polka dot. And that's stippling. I love that texture. I just love texture. I think it's super, super cool. Okay, so negative painting, what you guys are gonna need to do, you're starting to see I'm getting stuff all over my worksheet from my palette. So we are going to need to draw something on the inside, and we're gonna paint around that. So I'm just gonna draw like a lightning bolt. Probably not like a good one. Not a super good lightning bolt. It'll do. It will do. It's fine. And then I'm just gonna paint around the lightning bolt. That's it. Sometimes it's easier to paint around things than to paint the thing. Okay, cool. Okay. Okay. As well, we've been talking about this as well too, but and kind of funny, it's right underneath the gradient because this is the exact same thing. But a soft edge, I should not be able to know or see where one value or one color ends and another one begins. So I'm gonna do a bunch of blues, a variety of blues, kind of like a light blue value scale. So I'm gonna apply down some white. Bring in my blue. And then I know this one's gonna be a challenge. So I'm just gonna try to blend these. Nice soft edge. Shouldn't know where my darker blue ends and my lighter blue begins. So when I'm doing this, I kind of like, basically kind of like tickle, super, super, super light pressure with my paintbrush. Oops. that up. But this, I don't have like a distinct easy spot where I know where my blue ends and my white begins, whereas I'm gonna do a distinct spot over here where I know it's going to end. It's kind of dirty. This is gonna be gray. Oop, get it in frame. It's gonna be a gray color because I've got black in my brush now, so it's gonna be gray. And then this is gonna be blue. That I can tell where my blue ends and my gray begins. So that is a hard edge right here, right there. Okay, detailing. What detailing is, I'm just gonna lay down a light blue as a base. Rocking and rolling through this one. Nice light blue. I'm gonna do kind of like a transparent one. My paper's kind of pooed already, so we're just gonna kind of do it. Okay, so detailing. When you do details, generally I'm talking about highlights. You will need to find generally your teeniest, tiniest round brushes to do your highlights. And you generally do your details with white. Now, some other things that you can use for detailing are like toothpicks, needles, flossing picks, things like that. But I want you to try to get super, super, super thin lines. See how thin of lines that you guys can get in your detailing. Try to get thin, thin, thin. Thin, thin, thin. See how thin of a line you can get. Thin, thin, thin. Thin, thin, thin. Whatever you try to practice, because when it comes to our painting that we're going to be doing next week, we're going to have details that we're going to have to do. So, better practice now. Oh, I messed up my... I'll fix those later. Here, I'll fix them now. Keep setting my palette down and messing stuff up. There we go. Okay, so we're gonna start learning some styles here. So I need some paint. Hurry up. Mixing a lot now. Right. Okay, cool. Yes, I got that. And more yellow. Okay. Okay, so impressionistic, this is like Monet, Manet, basically like the late 1920s and Paris style. Super similar to impasto, but slight difference. So to do impressionistic, it's all about trying to capture the sparkle of the light. And it's about thick paint. And I love impressionistic style. It's so fun to paint when you're doing it. So I'm gonna lay down, I'm gonna go in, just lay down a bunch of lines, loop, just kind of lay down. Clean my brush. I'm gonna go in with some blue now. It's already looking like Monet's water lily paintings already. This is exactly how he did his water painting. You just slap it on. Just slap it on the paint. And then for funsies, throw on a little bit of yellow some places. Because this is going to be basically your highlights right here, so you wait to do your lights until the very last on top, because that's where they go. And then maybe a little smidget of white. And impressionistic, very fun, right? Okay, so impasto, we need to switch more to our flat brush. So I need to grab one of those. Here we go, here's one. Here's one for me, for an impasto. So impasto is very much like Van Gogh. So Van Gogh is kind of like impressionistic, but he did directional painting. Whereas impressionistic, they just did side to side. That's it. So impasto, we can get kind of crazy and funky and weird and have some fun with this. So that's what we're gonna do. So I'm gonna go in with my flat brush and okay, now I'm gonna use some black on this one, kind of like Van Gogh's Starry Night. Slap it on. Because when we paint in this directional, you can see the direction come through. Slapping it on. I'm gonna go in with some white too, why not, right? And you can even do some like muddy brush strokes as well, because you can see those brush strokes. It's so fun. See how you can see my swirl? And then if you want, you can cover it back up. It's the beauty of painting. If you don't like something, you can paint back over it. So that's impasto. Okay, now I'm gonna do wet, 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 wet. On. Wet. So you can do kind of like a watercolor effect if you want. Okay, I had a quick break to lay down some tape. You guys are gonna use actual good masking tape. I just found some tape that I had really quickly. So with masking, there's some beauty that you can lay down some stuff. So we can block out anything that we want to basically mask. We are gonna do it when we want to make sure we have clean edges, which will be really nice to ensure that we keep the edges of our painting really good. When that's dry, I'm gonna peel this up. So I'm gonna move on to the directional strokes. So lastly, directional strokes. So when we are doing like hair texture, things like that, or grass, directional strokes, so important. So that's our last little bit, is directional strokes. That definitely entails a dry brush to get this done. So this looks like it's dry. I'm gonna just lift it up really quickly and it should be all good. A little bit of ripping, sometimes that happens, especially on this paper. Won't happen on our canvas paper though. It'd be like, just ripped. I don't have good good tape like you guys do. But there's masking, let me zoom out. There is our whole techniques page that you guys will need to complete and turn into me, Riley. Take your time, don't rush. If you need help, let me know. But enjoy, should be fun.